When Truth Leaves Them Speechless begins by describing a moment that many chosen ones eventually encounter. A moment when the tension surrounding a situation reaches its breaking point, and the truth finally enters the conversation with unmistakable clarity. For a long time before this moment arrives, the chosen one may have found themselves surrounded by voices that questioned their perspective, dismissed their observations, or attempted to reshape the narrative of what was actually happening. In environments where confidence is often mistaken for correctness, the loudest voices can sometimes dominate the discussion, while quieter, more thoughtful observations are ignored or underestimated. During this period, the chosen one may have experienced moments of frustration as others spoke with certainty about situations they only partially understood. Yet instead of reacting impulsively or engaging in endless arguments, the chosen one chose a different path. They listened carefully, watched closely, and allowed time to reveal patterns that others were too distracted or too confident to notice. This patience created a quiet advantage that few people around them fully recognized at the time. While others were focused on defending their opinions or controlling the conversation, the chosen one was building a deeper understanding of the situation beneath the surface. They noticed the small inconsistencies that appeared in certain explanations, the subtle shifts in behavior when specific topics were mentioned, and the underlying motivations that shaped how people responded when challenged. Each observation became another piece of a larger picture forming gradually within their mind. For a while, the chosen one may have felt as though their insights existed in isolation, as if they were the only ones seeing the full pattern emerging from the scattered details of the situation. Yet the strength of truth often lies not in how loudly it is spoken, but in how clearly it is understood. Eventually, the moment arrives when the chosen one decides to speak, not with anger or desperation, but with calm precision. What they say does not rely on speculation or emotional reaction. Instead, it reflects the careful understanding they have developed through observation and reflection. When this happens, the dynamic of the entire conversation begins to shift. The people who once believed they controlled the narrative suddenly realize that the chosen one has seen far more than they expected. Their assumptions collapse under the weight of clarity. The arguments they prepared lose their strength because the chosen one has already addressed the deeper reality behind them. In that moment, something remarkable happens. The noise that once surrounded the conversation disappears. The voices that once dominated the discussion fall silent, not because they were forced into silence, but because they no longer have a convincing response. The introduction reveals the central message of this story. When the chosen one speaks from genuine understanding rather than reaction, truth has a way of cutting through confusion with remarkable power. The moment others become speechless is not simply a victory in an argument. It is the moment when clarity becomes impossible to ignore. The long period of being questioned begins long before the moment when everyone finally falls silent. It unfolds during the quieter chapters of the chosen one's journey, when their observations and perspectives were still being met with doubt, skepticism, or subtle dismissal from those around them. At first, the questioning may not have seemed hostile. It might have appeared as casual disagreement, a difference of opinion, or simple misunderstanding. Yet as time passed, a pattern gradually emerged. When the chosen one attempted to point out something deeper beneath the surface of a situation, certain individuals reacted with surprising confidence in opposing them. They spoke as though the chosen one had misinterpreted events, misunderstood intentions, or imagined complexities that were not really there. For the chosen one, this stage required a unique kind of emotional discipline. Being questioned repeatedly can slowly erode confidence if a person is not grounded in their own awareness. When many voices confidently insist that reality looks different from what you perceive, the mind naturally begins examining itself for error. The chosen one may have spent long moments reflecting quietly, asking whether their interpretation was accurate or whether they had overlooked something important. Yet each time they revisited the situation carefully, the same subtle signals continued appearing. Small inconsistencies within the explanations offered by others, behavioral patterns that did not align with the narratives being presented publicly, reactions that felt disproportionate when certain topics were mentioned. These details did not disappear simply because others dismissed them. They remained present, quietly reinforcing the chosen one's growing understanding. Meanwhile, the people who questioned the chosen one often believed they held the stronger position. In many social environments, confidence itself can create the illusion of authority. When someone speaks loudly, repeatedly, and with apparent certainty, others may assume that confidence reflects accuracy. This dynamic can create a situation where the chosen one appears to be standing alone against a group that seems united in its interpretation of events. During this period, the chosen one may have experienced moments of isolation, not necessarily because others rejected them completely, but because their deeper insights did not yet have visible confirmation. This stage tests patience in ways that are rarely discussed openly. It requires the ability to remain calm while being misunderstood, the ability to continue observing while others rush to conclusions, and the ability to resist the temptation to prove oneself prematurely. Many people would feel compelled to argue immediately or forcefully defend their perspective, yet the chosen ones sensed that arguing without sufficient clarity would only deepen the confusion. Instead of reacting impulsively, they continued watching carefully. They listened to how people explained events and compared those explanations with what they had personally observed. Slowly, the difference between appearance and reality became clearer. The questioning they experienced did not silence their insight, it sharpened it. Each challenge forced them to refine their understanding and examine the situation from multiple angles. In many ways, this long period of being questioned became a training ground for discernment. While others were busy defending narratives, the chosen one was quietly strengthening their ability to see through them. They began recognizing how certain individuals relied on confident language rather than factual consistency. They noticed how discussions sometimes shifted direction when someone approached an uncomfortable truth. They observed how emotional reactions often revealed more about a situation than carefully prepared explanations did. Over time, these observations created a deep internal map of the situation's dynamics. The chosen one understood not only what was happening, but also why certain people responded the way they did. Still, the external environment had not yet reached the point where these insights could be openly validated. The questioning continued. There may have been moments when someone attempted to challenge the chosen one publicly, presenting arguments designed to undermine their perspective. In those moments, the chosen one faced an important decision. They could either respond emotionally and become entangled in endless debate, or they could maintain composure and allow time to reveal what words alone could not yet prove. Again and again they chose composure. This restraint sometimes confused those who expected confrontation. Some interpreted the chosen one's calm silence as uncertainty or weakness. Others assumed that the absence of immediate rebuttal meant the chosen one had no real response. Yet in reality, the chosen one understood something deeper. Truth does not always need to be defended immediately. Sometimes the most powerful response is patience, because patience allows patterns to expose themselves naturally. As time continued passing, subtle shifts began occurring in the environment around them. The confident explanations offered by others occasionally contradicted themselves. Situations that once seemed clear became more complicated as new details emerged. Observers who were not directly involved began noticing inconsistencies that previously went unchallenged. The same individuals who once questioned the chosen one started encountering moments where their own assumptions felt less certain. These small changes did not happen overnight. They unfolded gradually, like cracks forming in a structure that once appeared perfectly stable. Throughout this entire process, the chosen one remained focused, not on proving others wrong, but on understanding the truth more deeply. Their motivation was not ego, but clarity. They did not seek recognition for being right, they sought alignment with reality. This distinction is what ultimately prepared them for the moment when they would finally speak with unmistakable authority. Because their understanding had been shaped through careful observation rather than emotional reaction, their perspective carried a level of precision that others could not easily dismiss once it was fully expressed. The long period of being questioned therefore served an unexpected purpose. What initially felt like opposition or misunderstanding became the very process that strengthened the chosen one's insight. Each challenge forced them to refine their thinking. Each disagreement encouraged deeper reflection. Each moment of doubt invited them to examine their perception with greater honesty. By the time the story reaches the moment when the chosen one finally speaks clearly, they are no longer relying on intuition alone. Their understanding has been tested repeatedly through observation, reflection, and patience. And because of that preparation, the words they eventually speak carry a quiet authority that does not require volume or aggression to be effective. When the chosen one finally reveals what they have understood all along, those who once questioned them find themselves facing a perspective that has been built carefully over time. The questions that once surrounded the chosen one now return to those who raised them. The conversation shifts in a direction few people expected. What began as a long period of being questioned transforms into the moment when the chosen one's clarity becomes impossible to ignore. And in that moment, the silence that follows says more than any argument ever could. Developing deep understanding begins during the quiet stretch of time when the chosen one stops trying to win arguments and instead begins focusing on something far more powerful: observation. After experiencing the long period of being questioned, dismissed, or misunderstood, many people might feel tempted to defend themselves immediately. Yet the chosen one sensed that reacting too quickly would only trap them inside endless cycles of debate, where the loudest voice often appears to win. Instead of entering that exhausting arena, the chosen one chose patience. They stepped back mentally and allowed themselves to observe the situation with calm attention. This decision became the turning point that transformed confusion into clarity. While others continued speaking confidently about their interpretations, the chosen one quietly began studying the deeper patterns beneath the surface. Observation has a unique advantage over argument. Arguments often revolve around opinions, but patterns reveal reality over time. The chosen one noticed how certain explanations shifted depending on who was present in the conversation. They noticed how some individuals reacted defensively when particular details were mentioned. They noticed how certain narratives were repeated frequently, but supported by surprisingly little consistent evidence. At first, these details appeared as small fragments, individual moments that did not yet form a complete picture. Yet the chosen one resisted the urge to draw immediate conclusions. Instead, they allowed those fragments to accumulate gradually. Each new observation became another piece of information stored quietly within their awareness. Over time, those pieces began connecting with one another in ways that revealed the underlying structure of the situation. One of the most important aspects of this stage was emotional discipline. Developing deep understanding requires the ability to separate observation from personal reaction. When someone feels challenged or misunderstood, it is natural to experience frustration. Yet the chosen one recognized that emotional reactions could distort perception if allowed to dominate the mind. Instead of allowing frustration to control their interpretation of events, they focused on maintaining mental clarity. They listened carefully not only to what people said, but also to how they said it. They paid attention to pauses in conversation, subtle shifts in tone, and the timing of certain responses. These details often reveal more than the words themselves. In this way, the chosen one's awareness expanded beyond the surface level of communication and began recognizing the emotional and psychological dynamics shaping the situation. Another key element of this stage involved recognizing the difference between appearance and intention. Many people communicate through carefully chosen words designed to protect their image or influence how others perceive them. The chosen one learned to look beyond those carefully constructed messages. Instead of accepting explanations at face value, they compared them with observable behavior over time. When someone claims one intention, but repeatedly acts in ways that contradict it, that contradiction becomes a powerful source of insight. Through this process, the chosen one gradually built a deeper understanding of the motivations influencing the people around them. They began recognizing patterns of defensiveness, patterns of avoidance, and patterns of subtle manipulation that others had overlooked or chosen to ignore. This level of awareness did not develop instantly. It required patience, reflection, and a willingness to reconsider assumptions repeatedly. The chosen one often revisited earlier observations to see how they fit into the growing pattern emerging before them. What initially appeared confusing began revealing a kind of internal logic once enough pieces were visible. Inconsistencies that once seemed isolated began connecting with other inconsistencies. Behavioral patterns that once seemed minor began forming recognizable trends. Through this process, the chosen one's understanding evolved from vague intuition into structured insight. They were no longer simply sensing that something was wrong. They could now see exactly where the contradictions existed and how they interacted with one another. During this period, the Chosen One also learned the importance of silence as a tool for clarity. In many conversations, people rush to fill silence with explanations, justifications, or emotional responses. The Chosen One discovered that remaining silent often encouraged others to reveal more than they intended. When someone is not immediately challenged, they may continue speaking until subtle contradictions appear within their own narrative. By allowing conversations to unfold naturally, the Chosen One gained access to information that might never have surfaced during confrontational debates. This practice of quiet observation strengthened their ability to understand complex dynamics without needing to force answers prematurely. As the Chosen One's understanding deepened, another transformation began taking place within their mindset. Instead of viewing the situation as a personal conflict, they started seeing it as a system of interactions shaped by individual motivations, fears, and strategies. This broader perspective allowed them to step outside the emotional intensity of the moment and examine the situation with analytical clarity. They began understanding why certain individuals behaved defensively, why certain narratives were repeated so strongly, and why certain topics triggered immediate resistance. These insights allowed the Chosen One to anticipate how conversations might unfold before they even began. When someone repeated a familiar explanation, the Chosen One could already see the gaps within that explanation and understand why those gaps existed. This level of awareness created a quiet confidence that did not rely on external validation. The Chosen One did not need others to agree immediately because their understanding was grounded in consistent observation rather than speculation. Meanwhile, the people who had once questioned the Chosen One remained unaware of how much the Chosen One's perspective had evolved. They continued speaking with the same confidence they had shown earlier, assuming that their explanations were sufficient to maintain control over the narrative. What they did not realize was that the Chosen One was no longer reacting to those explanations emotionally. Instead, they were listening with a level of attention that transformed each conversation into another opportunity to refine their understanding. Each time someone repeated an argument or offered a new justification, the Chosen One quietly compared it with the pattern of information they had already collected. This process gradually exposed the weaknesses within the narrative that others believed remained convincing. Through this stage, the Chosen One also developed an appreciation for timing. Understanding a situation deeply does not automatically mean that speaking immediately will produce the best outcome. Sometimes insight requires patience to become effective. The Chosen One recognized that there would eventually come a moment when the accumulated clarity within their mind would align with the right circumstances for speaking openly. Until that moment arrived, their task was not to argue, but to continue observing. This patience allowed the truth to mature within their understanding. By the time the Chosen One finally decided to speak, their perspective would not rely on emotional persuasion, but on the undeniable strength of carefully gathered insight. The development of deep understanding therefore became the quiet foundation beneath everything that followed. While others focused on controlling the conversation, the Chosen One focused on understanding reality. While others relied on confident explanations, the Chosen One relied on consistent patterns. This difference in approach slowly transformed the balance of power within the situation. Those who once believed they controlled the narrative were unknowingly revealing more information with each conversation, while the Chosen One was assembling that information into a coherent structure of truth. By the time the moment arrives when the Chosen One finally speaks clearly about what they have seen, their words carry the weight of every observation made during this long period of reflection. And because those observations were gathered patiently rather than impulsively, the clarity they produce has a depth that leaves little room for denial. The moment the truth is spoken begins not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet shift in awareness, when the Chosen One finally recognizes that the time for observation has reached its natural conclusion. For a long time they have listened more than they spoke, watched more than they reacted, and analyzed more than they argued. The knowledge they have gathered through patience now sits clearly within their mind like a completed puzzle. Each piece that once appeared scattered now forms a coherent picture. In this moment, the Chosen One understands something important. Truth does not need to be forced into the conversation aggressively. When the understanding is complete, the right moment for speaking often appears naturally. It arrives during an ordinary discussion, a familiar debate, or a repeated claim that others believe remains unchallenged. What makes this moment different from the past is not the situation itself, but the clarity the chosen one now carries within them. When they speak, they do not rush. They do not raise their voice or attempt to dominate the conversation. Instead, their words enter the discussion calmly, precisely, and with a level of detail that reveals how deeply they have been paying attention all along. The chosen one does not rely on emotional accusation. They simply begin describing the pattern they have observed. At first, the people listening may assume the conversation will follow the same familiar path as before. They may expect the chosen one to repeat earlier concerns that were once dismissed. Yet as the chosen one continues speaking, something begins to change. Instead of vague impressions or emotional reactions, the chosen one explains the situation with structured clarity. They connect events that others previously treated as separate incidents. They point out how certain explanations contradict one another. They describe how specific behaviors align with motivations that were never openly acknowledged. The deeper the chosen one speaks, the more the listeners begin realizing that this perspective cannot easily be dismissed. What surprises them most is not the confidence of the chosen one's voice, but the accuracy of their insight. Each detail the chosen one mentions corresponds with something others remember, but had not connected in the same way. The conversation slowly shifts from argument to recognition. People begin looking at one another, as if realizing that the chosen one has articulated something they sensed, but never fully understood. Those who once questioned the chosen one now feel the ground beneath their assumptions becoming unstable. The explanations they relied upon no longer appear sufficient to counter the clarity being presented. The chosen one continues speaking with the same calm composure, explaining the sequence of events step by step, as though unfolding a map that had been hidden in plain sight. The power of this moment lies in the way truth organizes chaos. Situations that once seemed confusing now appear logical when viewed through the pattern the chosen one reveals. Observers begin remembering moments when they felt something was not quite right, but could not explain why. Now those memories align with the explanation the chosen one provides. The truth that once existed only as subtle intuition now becomes visible through language. Another remarkable aspect of this moment is the emotional tone carried by the chosen one's words. There is no bitterness in their voice, no desire to humiliate those who doubted them. Instead, there is a quiet steadiness that reflects the depth of understanding they have developed over time. This emotional discipline reinforces the credibility of what they are saying. People instinctively recognize the difference between someone who is speaking from anger and someone who is speaking from clarity. The chosen one's calm presence communicates that they are not trying to win an argument. They are simply presenting the truth as they have come to understand it. Because of this tone, the conversation does not escalate into conflict. Instead, it slows down. The usual defensive responses fail to appear because the chosen one has already addressed the points that would normally provoke denial. Each time someone considers challenging what has been said, they realize that the chosen one has already explained the reasoning behind that conclusion. The anticipated counter-arguments dissolve before they are even spoken. Silence begins spreading through the conversation, not as an absence of thought, but as a moment of recognition. Those who once believed they controlled the narrative now find themselves unable to maintain the same certainty. The chosen one has shifted the entire dynamic simply by speaking with precision. This moment carries significance beyond the conversation itself. For the chosen one, it represents the culmination of everything they learned during the long period of observation. Each moment when they chose patience instead of reaction has led to this point. Each time they listened carefully, rather than arguing impulsively, has strengthened the clarity they now express. When they finally speak, their words carry the weight of that entire journey, and because their understanding is grounded in consistent observation, it cannot easily be dismantled by confident rhetoric alone. For those who once questioned the chosen one, the experience is equally transformative. They begin recognizing how easily confidence can disguise misunderstanding. The chosen one's explanation reveals that insight does not always appear in the loudest voice or the most immediate response. Sometimes the deepest understanding develops quietly over time, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Observers who witness this moment often feel a subtle shift in how they perceive the chosen one. The person they once saw as overly cautious or uncertain now appears thoughtful and perceptive. Respect grows naturally, not because the chosen one demanded it, but because their clarity earned it. In this way, the moment when the truth is spoken becomes more than a victory in conversation. It becomes a turning point in perception. The chosen one's ability to articulate the deeper reality of the situation changes how others interpret everything that happened before. Doubts fade as understanding replaces them. The questions that once surrounded the chosen one now surround those who dismissed their perspective. And through this transformation, the chosen one discovers something powerful about the nature of truth. Truth does not need to shout to be heard. When it is expressed with clarity and calm confidence, it has the quiet strength to reshape the entire conversation. The moment the chosen one speaks becomes the moment when confusion finally gives way to understanding, and the silence that follows becomes the clearest sign that the truth has been recognized. When opponents realize they were underestimated, unfolds in the quiet aftermath of the moment when the chosen one finally spoke with unmistakable clarity. The conversation may have ended with fewer words than it began, yet the silence left behind carries a weight that everyone present can feel. For those who once questioned the chosen one or dismissed their perspective, a subtle realization begins forming within their thoughts. It does not arrive all at once, and it is rarely announced aloud. Instead, it appears gradually, like a slow awareness spreading across a room after a sudden shift in light. The individuals who once believed they understood the situation completely now recognize that they overlooked something important. They underestimated the depth of attention the chosen one had been giving to every detail. For a long time, the chosen one's quietness may have been interpreted as hesitation or uncertainty. People often assume that those who speak less understand less. But the moment that just unfolded reveals how mistaken that assumption can be. The chosen one was not silent because they lacked insight. They were silent because they were still observing, allowing the full pattern of events to reveal itself before speaking. Now that their understanding has been expressed clearly, those who once stood confidently against them begin reassessing everything they believed about the situation. At first, this reassessment may take place privately within each person's mind. They replay the chosen one's words, comparing them with the events they personally witnessed. The connections that the chosen one described begin appearing in their own memories as well. Moments that once seemed insignificant now take on new meaning. Explanations that once sounded convincing now feel incomplete. As these realizations accumulate, the certainty that once fueled their opposition gradually weakens. What surprises them most is not simply that the chosen one was correct about certain details. It is the realization that the chosen one understood the situation more thoroughly than anyone expected. While others focused on defending their assumptions, the chosen one was quietly studying the entire landscape of the situation. This recognition often produces a moment of humility within those who once opposed them. People rarely enjoy admitting that they misjudged someone, yet when the evidence becomes clear enough, resistance slowly gives way to acknowledgement. Even if this acknowledgement is not expressed publicly, it changes how they perceive the chosen one moving forward. Respect begins replacing dismissal. Curiosity replaces skepticism. The dynamic that once placed the chosen one in the position of defending their perspective now shifts dramatically. Another important transformation occurs in the emotional tone of the environment. Before the chosen one spoke, the atmosphere may have been filled with tension and competition, as different individuals attempted to assert their version of events with confidence. After the chosen one's explanation, that competitive energy begins fading. When clarity enters a conversation, it often dissolves the need for constant debate. The people who once challenged the chosen one realize that continuing to argue would only expose the weaknesses in their own understanding. Instead, they become quieter, not out of embarrassment alone, but because they are processing the deeper implications of what they just heard. Observers who were not directly involved in the disagreement may also begin noticing the shift. They see the contrast between the chosen one's calm explanation and the uncertainty that now surrounds those who previously spoke with such confidence. This contrast creates a powerful impression. It demonstrates that insight does not depend on volume or dominance, but on careful observation and thoughtful reflection. For many witnesses, the chosen one's composure becomes as impressive as the accuracy of their words. They recognize that maintaining such clarity under pressure requires a level of emotional discipline that few people possess. As the realization spreads through the group, the chosen one's presence begins carrying a different kind of influence. It is not the influence of authority imposed from above, but the influence that emerges naturally when someone consistently demonstrates perceptive understanding. People begin paying closer attention when the chosen one speaks. They become more curious about how the chosen one interprets situations, knowing that their perspective may reveal connections others overlooked. This shift in perception does not require the chosen one to claim victory or demand recognition. The respect arises quietly from the recognition of their insight. At the same time, the chosen one remains grounded in the same calm awareness that guided them throughout the earlier stages of the story. They do not react to this shift with arrogance or triumph. Instead, they continue engaging with others thoughtfully, understanding that the goal was never to defeat anyone, but to illuminate the truth of the situation. This humility reinforces the respect that others now feel toward them. When someone demonstrates both accuracy and composure, their influence becomes stronger, because it is not driven by ego. Another subtle but important development begins taking place within those who underestimated the chosen one. They start reflecting on how their earlier assumptions formed. Some may realize that they relied too heavily on confident explanations rather than examining the underlying evidence. Others may recognize that group dynamics influence their perception more than they initially realized. When several people repeat the same narrative, it can create a powerful illusion of certainty, even when the narrative lacks solid foundation. Witnessing the chosen one calmly dismantle that illusion encourages them to question how easily assumptions can spread within a group. This reflection becomes an opportunity for growth. Instead of remaining defensive about their earlier position, many begin appreciating the lesson hidden within the experience. They learn that understanding a situation requires patience and openness to perspectives that may initially feel uncomfortable. The chosen one's example demonstrates how careful observation can reveal truths that confident assumptions often overlook. In this way, the moment when opponents realize they underestimated the chosen one becomes a learning experience not only for them, but for everyone who witnessed the conversation. It reminds them that insight often develops quietly before it appears publicly. By the time the chosen one spoke, their understanding had already matured through countless hours of reflection and observation. The moment when their words left others speechless was not the result of sudden brilliance, but the culmination of patient awareness cultivated over time. As this realization settles into the environment, the chosen one's role within the group changes subtly, yet permanently. They are no longer seen as someone whose perspective can be dismissed casually. Instead, they are recognized as someone who sees beyond the surface of situations, someone whose calm attention allows them to recognize patterns others miss. This transformation in perception becomes the natural consequence of the moment that just occurred. Without demanding authority or recognition, the chosen one has demonstrated a level of understanding that commands respect on its own. And as the conversation moves forward into new situations and discussions, the memory of that moment remains quietly present in everyone's mind, reminding them that the person they once underestimated possesses a clarity that deserves to be heard. The silence that follows becomes one of the most powerful moments in the entire unfolding story, because after the chosen one has spoken with calm clarity, and the realization spreads that their understanding cannot easily be dismissed, something unusual begins to happen within the environment surrounding them. The conversation that once moved quickly, filled with confident explanations and competing perspectives, suddenly slows down. Words that once flowed freely from those who believed they controlled the narrative begin disappearing. It is not that people no longer have thoughts or reactions. Instead, they find themselves processing something deeper than the surface level of the discussion. The silence that appears is not empty. It is filled with reflection, reconsideration, and the subtle recognition that the chosen one has shifted the entire direction of the conversation simply by presenting the truth with precision. In many situations, people interpret silence as weakness or avoidance, but the silence that now fills the room carries a different meaning. It represents the moment when confidence built on assumption collapses under the weight of clarity. Those who once believed they could easily challenge the chosen one now realize that continuing the argument would only expose the gaps in their own reasoning. The carefully constructed explanations that once seemed persuasive no longer feel strong enough to counter the pattern the chosen one revealed. As a result, the conversation reaches a natural pause. People look at one another, replaying the chosen one's words in their minds, examining the details that were just connected so clearly. Each person begins revisiting their own memories of earlier events, recognizing how the chosen one's explanation fits those memories more accurately than the previous narrative did. This moment of reflection spreads gradually through the group like a quiet wave. Some individuals may lower their gaze as they process what they have just heard. Others remain still, their minds moving quickly even though their voices have fallen silent. The chosen one notices this shift, but does not rush to fill the silence. Their patience remains as steady as it was during the earlier stages of the journey. Instead of pressing the advantage or repeating their argument for emphasis, they allow the quiet space to remain. This restraint is important because the silence itself is doing the work that further words would only complicate. When people are given space to process a truth they did not expect to hear, that truth often settles more deeply into their understanding. The chosen one recognizes that forcing the conversation forward would interrupt this natural moment of recognition. Within that silence, another transformation begins taking shape. The people who once spoke with certainty now experience a shift in emotional energy. Confidence built on assumption gives way to humility built on realization. They begin seeing how easily their earlier perspective was influenced by incomplete information or group consensus. Some may feel a quiet sense of embarrassment as they recall the way they dismissed the chosen one's observations in the past. Others may feel curiosity, wondering how the chosen one was able to perceive the pattern so clearly while everyone else overlooked it. These reflections do not require the chosen one to demand acknowledgement. The truth itself has already begun reshaping the atmosphere of the conversation. Meanwhile, the observers who were not directly involved in the disagreement experience the silence differently. For them, it becomes a moment of learning. They witness firsthand how a calm and carefully reasoned explanation can change the direction of a conversation more effectively than loud argument or emotional confrontation. They see how the chosen one's patience allowed them to gather the insight necessary to speak with confidence when the right moment arrived. This observation leaves a lasting impression. It demonstrates that clarity often grows through quiet attention rather than aggressive persuasion. In the future, these observers may remember this moment whenever they encounter situations where the loudest voice attempts to dominate the narrative. They will recall how the chosen one waited, observed, and then spoke with precision when the time was right. For the chosen one, the silence carries its own meaning as well. It confirms something they sensed long before this conversation began. Truth has a natural power when it is expressed without distortion or exaggeration. They did not need to attack anyone personally or raise their voice to be heard. By simply explaining the pattern they observed, they allowed others to see the reality for themselves. This realization strengthens their confidence in the path they chose earlier, the path of observation rather than immediate confrontation. During the long period when their perspective was questioned, it might have felt tempting to argue more aggressively or prove their point through forceful debate. Yet the chosen one now sees that patience gave them a far greater advantage. The clarity they expressed carried the weight of time and careful reflection, which made it far more difficult for others to dismiss. As the silence continues, subtle signs of acceptance begin appearing within the group. Someone may nod slowly as they reconsider the situation. Another person may ask a thoughtful question rather than presenting another challenge. These small signals indicate that the atmosphere of the conversation has changed permanently. The chosen one's explanation has created a new foundation for understanding, and people are now adjusting their perspectives accordingly. The silence, therefore, becomes a bridge between the old narrative and the new clarity that is emerging. Eventually, someone may speak again, but when they do, the tone of the conversation will be different. The earlier confidence built on assumption has been replaced by a more careful approach to understanding the situation. People now recognize that the chosen one's perspective deserves serious attention. Even those who once disagreed most strongly are less eager to dismiss what they hear. The silence that followed the chosen one's words has done something remarkable. It has reset the emotional balance of the discussion. Instead of competing voices struggling for dominance, There is now a shared recognition that deeper understanding has entered the room. The chosen one remains calm throughout this transition, aware that the silence itself was one of the most meaningful responses they could have received. When words disappear after truth is spoken, it often means the truth has reached a level where argument is no longer necessary. In that quiet space, understanding begins taking root, and for the chosen one, that silence becomes the clearest sign that the clarity they carried within them has finally been recognized by everyone present. The community begins seeing the difference. Unfolds gradually after the powerful silence that followed the chosen one's words. What once existed as a tense disagreement slowly transforms into a moment of collective awareness, and people within the environment begin noticing something they had overlooked before. The contrast between the chosen one's clarity and the uncertainty of those who once challenged them becomes increasingly visible. This realization does not emerge through confrontation or dramatic announcements. Instead, it spreads quietly through observation, reflection, and subtle changes in how individuals interpret the conversation that just took place. Those who witnessed the moment begin replaying the discussion in their minds. They remember the confidence with which certain individuals spoke earlier, the certainty they expressed when dismissing the chosen one's perspective. Then they recall how the chosen one responded, not with raised voices or emotional frustration, but with calm explanations that connected events in a way no one else had considered. As these memories settle, the difference becomes unmistakable. The chosen one was not merely defending themselves, they were revealing a deeper understanding of the situation that had been developing quietly over time. This contrast between noise and clarity becomes the first sign that the perception of the chosen one is beginning to shift within the community. People start recognizing that the chosen one's strength did not come from dominating the conversation, but from understanding it more deeply than anyone expected. While others relied on confident assumptions, the chosen one relied on patient observation. This distinction becomes increasingly meaningful as the group reflects on what happened. In many social environments, people are accustomed to equating authority with volume or confidence. The individual who speaks the most forcefully often appears to lead the discussion. Yet the moment they just witnessed challenges that assumption. The chosen one demonstrated that true insight can appear quietly and still transform the entire conversation. Observers begin recognizing that there is a difference between speaking loudly and speaking accurately. One creates noise, while the other creates understanding. As this realization spreads, the chosen one's presence within the community begins carrying a new kind of influence. This influence is not imposed or demanded. It arises naturally from the respect people feel after witnessing the clarity of their perspective. Individuals who once paid little attention to the chosen one's observations now become more attentive when they speak. They begin listening with curiosity rather than skepticism, wondering what deeper pattern the chosen one might recognize next. This shift in attention reflects a broader transformation in how the group perceives insight and leadership. The chosen one has demonstrated that thoughtful awareness can reveal truths that confident arguments often overlook. The people who once challenged the chosen one also experience their own internal transformation during this stage. After the conversation ended, they may have spent time reflecting privately on what occurred. Some begin acknowledging that they spoke too quickly or relied too heavily on assumptions. Others recognize that they underestimated the chosen one's capacity for careful analysis. These realizations may not always be expressed publicly, but they influence how those individuals interact with the chosen one moving forward. The tone of future conversations becomes more measured. Instead of dismissing the chosen one's perspective immediately, they consider it more thoughtfully. In this way, the moment when the chosen one spoke with clarity continues shaping the environment long after the discussion itself has ended. The broader community also learns something important through witnessing this transformation. They see how quickly narratives can form when people rely on confidence rather than evidence. They observe how easily group dynamics can reinforce assumptions that remain unexamined for long periods of time. Most importantly, they witness how a single voice grounded in observation can disrupt those assumptions without hostility or aggression. This lesson becomes part of the collective memory of the group. The next time a disagreement arises, people may approach it differently because they remember how the chosen one revealed the deeper truth behind a situation that once seemed settled. For the chosen one, this stage of the journey carries its own quiet significance. They did not pursue recognition or attempt to prove themselves superior to anyone else. Their goal was simply to express the truth they had observed after long reflection. Yet the response from the community demonstrates that authenticity often carries its own form of influence. When someone speaks with calm precision and genuine understanding, others naturally begin paying attention. The chosen one does not need to demand authority because their clarity creates it organically. This realization reinforces the lesson they learned during the earlier stages of the story. Patience and observation are often more powerful than immediate reaction. By allowing themselves time to understand the situation fully before speaking, the chosen one ensured that their words would carry weight when the moment finally arrived. Another subtle shift occurs within the relationship surrounding the chosen one. Individuals who once viewed them as uncertain or overly cautious now begin seeing them as perceptive and thoughtful. Conversations become more balanced because people are no longer assuming that the chosen one's insights can be ignored easily. This change does not transform every relationship instantly, but it creates a new foundation for interaction. The chosen one's perspective now holds a place of respect within the community's discussions. As time passes, the story of that moment may even become something people reference quietly when reflecting on the dynamics of truth and perception. They remember the conversation where the chosen one calmly explained the deeper pattern behind the situation and how the room fell silent afterward. That memory serves as a reminder that understanding often arrives through careful observation rather than immediate certainty. It encourages others to look more closely at situations before forming conclusions. In this way, the chosen one's moment of clarity extends beyond the immediate conversation and begins influencing how the community approaches future challenges. Ultimately, this stage reveals how truth reshapes perception, not through force, but through consistency. The chosen one did not attempt to control the narrative aggressively. Instead, they allowed their understanding to develop quietly until it was ready to be expressed clearly. When that moment arrived, the difference between assumption and insight became impossible to ignore. The community now sees the chosen one differently because they have witnessed the depth of awareness behind their calm presence. And through this recognition, the chosen one's role within the environment evolves naturally. They become someone whose perspective carries meaning, someone whose patience revealed a truth others had overlooked. The community may not announce this transformation openly, but it becomes visible in the way people listen more carefully, question their assumptions more thoughtfully, and recognize that clarity sometimes appears from the quietest voice in the room. The strength of speaking with precision begins revealing its deeper meaning only after the dust of the earlier conversation has fully settled, and the chosen one has had time to reflect on what truly happened. At first, the moment may have appeared simple on the surface. A discussion took place, the chosen one spoke clearly, and those who once challenged them found themselves without convincing responses. Yet when viewed more carefully, something far more significant occurred. The power that shifted the conversation did not come from authority, force, or even persuasion in the traditional sense. It came from precision. Precision in observation, precision in timing, precision in the words chosen to explain what had been seen. The chosen one did not overwhelm the discussion with endless arguments or emotional reactions. Instead, they spoke only what was necessary, connecting the essential details in a way that made the truth visible to everyone present. This form of communication carries a strength that many people overlook. In a world where conversations often become louder, faster, and more competitive, precision creates a different kind of impact. When someone speaks with carefully chosen words that reflect deep understanding, those words travel directly to the core of the situation. They do not scatter across the conversation as noise. They land exactly where they are meant to land. This is what happened when the chosen one explained the pattern they had observed. Each statement they made served a purpose. Each detail connected to another detail. Each observation revealed how the pieces of the situation fit together. By the time they finished speaking, the explanation formed a structure that others could not easily dismantle, because it was built from consistent evidence rather than emotional opinion. The chosen one had spent so much time quietly developing their understanding that when they finally spoke, their explanation appeared almost effortless. Yet the simplicity of their words was not the result of shallow thinking. It was the result of deep preparation. Precision often emerges only after someone has examined a situation thoroughly enough to remove unnecessary assumptions and distractions. The chosen one had done exactly that during the earlier stages of the journey. They listened carefully to conversations, watched how events unfolded, and considered how each piece of information related to the larger picture. Through this process, they refined their understanding until only the essential truths remained. When they finally spoke, those truths appeared clear and undeniable, because the chosen one had already done the internal work of sorting through the complexity beforehand. Observers within the community begin recognizing this difference as they reflect on what they witnessed. They notice that the chosen one did not attempt to dominate the discussion with volume or aggression. Instead, they relied on the quiet authority that comes from understanding something deeply. This realization becomes an important lesson for everyone who watched the conversation unfold. It demonstrates that leadership within a discussion does not always belong to the loudest voice. Sometimes it belongs to the voice that speaks most accurately. The chosen one's example shows that precision carries a form of influence that cannot easily be challenged because it is grounded in clarity rather than emotion. Another important aspect of precision is timing. Speaking the truth at the right moment can transform how that truth is received. If the chosen one had tried to explain the entire pattern earlier in the process, when fewer details were visible, their explanation might have seemed speculative or incomplete. By waiting until the pattern had fully revealed itself through repeated observation, they ensured that their explanation would align with experiences others had already witnessed. When people heard the chosen one speak, they could connect those words with their own memories of earlier events. This alignment between explanation and experience made the chosen one's words resonate more strongly. The truth did not feel imposed upon the conversation, it felt discovered within it. Precision therefore operates on multiple levels at once. It shapes what is said, how it is said, and when it is said. The chosen one demonstrated mastery of all three dimensions without needing to present themselves as an authority figure. Their calm presence communicated that they were not seeking control over the conversation. They were simply offering a clear interpretation of what had been happening all along. This approach created space for others to see the truth rather than forcing them to accept it defensively. As the community reflects on this moment, they begin appreciating the discipline required to communicate in such a precise way. Many people struggle to separate their emotions from their explanations during conflict. When someone feels misunderstood or challenged, the natural reaction is to defend oneself vigorously. The chosen one showed a different path. They allowed themselves to feel whatever emotions arose during the earlier stages of questioning, but when the moment came to speak publicly, they focused on clarity rather than reaction. This discipline ensured that their message remained focused on the truth of the situation, rather than the emotional tension surrounding it. For the chosen one, recognizing the strength of precision becomes an important personal realization. They see how their patience and careful observation created the conditions for this moment of clarity. Instead of viewing their earlier silence as weakness, they now understand it as preparation. Each moment when they chose to listen instead of argue strengthened the insight they eventually shared. Each time they resisted the urge to respond impulsively allowed them to gather another piece of the larger pattern. By the time they spoke, their understanding had matured enough to stand on its own. This realization strengthens the chosen one's confidence in their approach to future challenges. They understand now that clarity often develops quietly before it appears publicly. As this awareness spreads through the community, it begins influencing how others approach their own conversations and disagreements. People become more attentive to the possibility that someone who appears quiet may actually be observing the situation more carefully than anyone realizes. They become more cautious about dismissing perspectives too quickly, remembering how the chosen one revealed an entire pattern that others had overlooked. The moment when the chosen one spoke with precision, therefore becomes more than a personal victory. It becomes a shared lesson about the power of thoughtful communication. In the end, the strength of speaking with precision transforms not only the outcome of the conversation, but also the understanding of everyone who witnessed it. The chosen one demonstrated that truth expressed with clarity carries its own authority. It does not require loudness or confrontation to make an impact. When the right words arrive at the right moment, supported by careful observation and thoughtful reflection, they have the power to reshape how an entire group understands a situation. And as the chosen one moves forward, this realization remains with them as a quiet source of confidence. They know now that insight developed patiently can eventually speak louder than any argument ever could. When truth leaves others speechless, gradually reveals the deeper meaning behind everything that unfolded during this journey. Because what initially appeared to be a single conversation was actually the culmination of a much longer process of observation, patience, and inner discipline. The chosen one did not arrive at that moment of clarity suddenly or by accident. Long before the words were spoken that left others silent, there had been a quiet period of watching, listening, and learning. During that time, the chosen one was absorbing details that many people overlooked because they were too focused on reacting quickly or protecting their own assumptions. While others rushed to conclusions or relied on confident statements that sounded persuasive on the surface, the chosen one allowed the situation to unfold naturally. This patience created the foundation for everything that followed. When the moment finally arrived for the chosen one to speak, they were not responding from frustration or emotional impulse. They were speaking from understanding. And understanding carries a different kind of power than argument ever can. When truth is expressed from a place of calm clarity, it has the ability to cut through confusion in a way that noise cannot. That is why the reaction of those who once challenged the chosen one was not loud disagreement or dramatic confrontation. It was silence. Silence often reveals more than words because it shows the moment when a narrative can no longer sustain itself. In that moment, people begin realizing that the explanation they previously believed no longer fits the evidence in front of them. The chosen one did not force this realization upon anyone. They simply presented the pattern they had observed with such precision that the contradiction became visible to everyone present. This moment of recognition is what makes truth so powerful. It does not require domination or control to change the atmosphere of a conversation. When truth becomes clear enough, it naturally reorganizes how people understand the situation. The chosen one's role in this transformation was not to defeat anyone personally, but to illuminate what had been hidden beneath assumptions and incomplete interpretations. As the community continues reflecting on what happened, they begin understanding that the chosen one's strength was never about proving others wrong. It was about remaining committed to clarity, even when doing so required patience and restraint. Many people underestimate the discipline required to wait until the right moment to speak. In environments where conversations move quickly and emotions escalate easily, silence can be mistaken for uncertainty. Yet the chosen one demonstrated that silence can also be preparation. By choosing not to react prematurely, they gave themselves the opportunity to see the situation from a broader perspective. This allowed them to identify connections that others missed while they were focused on immediate reactions. When the chosen one finally explained those connections, the explanation felt almost inevitable because it aligned so naturally with the events everyone had already experienced. The lesson within this conclusion, therefore, extends beyond the specific situation that triggered the conversation. It reveals something fundamental about the relationship between truth and perception. People often assume that influence comes from constant speaking or immediate response, yet the chosen one's experience shows that influence can also emerge from thoughtful restraint. When someone takes the time to understand a situation fully before speaking, their words carry the weight of that understanding. Those words become difficult to dismiss because they reflect a perspective developed through careful attention rather than impulse. For the chosen one, recognizing this principle becomes a source of lasting confidence moving forward. They no longer feel pressured to respond instantly to every challenge or misunderstanding. They understand now that clarity develops over time, and that speaking at the right moment can have far greater impact than speaking too soon. This realization transforms how they approach future conversations and conflicts. Instead of reacting defensively, they continue observing patiently, trusting that the truth will reveal itself when enough pieces of the pattern become visible. This approach does not mean avoiding difficult conversations. It means entering those conversations with the calm assurance that comes from understanding the situation deeply. As the community gradually absorbs the significance of what occurred, the chosen one's presence begins carrying a new kind of respect. People remember the moment when confident accusations or assumptions lost their certainty because a clearer explanation emerged. They remember the composure with which the chosen one presented their observations and the quiet confidence behind those words. This memory becomes a reminder that insight often appears where others least expect it. Sometimes the individual who speaks the least during a discussion is the one who has been seeing the most all along. Ultimately, the story concludes not with a sense of victory over others, but with a deeper appreciation for the role clarity plays in revealing truth. The chosen one did not set out to silence anyone. The silence that followed their words simply reflected the moment when a clearer understanding entered the conversation. Through patience, observation, and precision, the chosen one demonstrated that truth expressed calmly can transform how people see an entire situation. And as they continue forward, this experience becomes part of their growth, reinforcing the knowledge that when insight is developed carefully and shared with clarity, it possesses a quiet strength capable of reshaping even the most confident assumptions.